When difficulty arises, there can be a tendency, like an attraction to distraction. There's a multiplicity of ways that when we start to feel something strong arising in our system, we come up against something that we don't know what to do, that it's very easy to distract ourselves. And you can just consider that for a moment, the different ways, not to make it bad or wrong, but distraction can happen in a lot of different ways. We get busy with a new project. We probably many times will focus on somebody else's issues, may try to fix somebody else, look at something that is very, larger than us so that we can, get involved. And that's none of that is a bad thing. We might even succumb to addictive behaviors. And what I want to say about that, though, is that you'll notice that when we distract, that we're actually conditioning ourselves in a memory of distraction, like whatever that pattern is. Not a memory, but it does get remembered in the system and becomes a habit, a pattern of distraction. And we have so many distractions available to us, specifically on social media. So that can be a huge arena of distraction, place of becoming deeply consumed, and it keeps us on the surface of things. We're not really with ourselves, we're distracted. So I want to read something here that I found from Carl Jung, and this has been around for a very long time. And how this reads is there is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. Hmm. By making darkness conscious. Now, there isn't anyone who doesn't have darkness in their life. There is darkness and light are the same fabric of consciousness. There's both. We live in duality, so we can't have one without the other. But my question for you is, how is it that when we feel ourselves in a place of darkness, a sense of feeling stuck, or maybe even wanting to habitually kind of create more darkness where we isolate ourselves and cut ourselves off from humanity, close the doors, pull down the shutters, turn out the lights, and maybe even label that as a sense of being a victim. So, the other part, the second principle that I wanted to say, well, first was, you know, you're just here. So, that pausing, to be able to stop and just be here. And then the second is to acknowledge that, yeah, I feel like I'm in a really dark place. It's not easy, and when we can acknowledge that, already the way out is coming. But how can we stay in the soup, in the muck of it long enough so that the way out is actually revealed to us? Like I can say this to you, but it might not help if it hasn't been your experience yet. But I do want to say that there is an element of faith or hope, that when we do hang out in darkness enough with a sense of openness, of being really honest with ourselves and allowing ourselves to feel the texture of that, the sensations, the difficulty, So it's like a real honesty about that. When we're in it and we're being authentic and real about it, we're not pushing it away, we're not minimizing it, and we're also not blaming it on anything outside of us. You know what? As soon as we begin to blame something outside of us, we're actually, this might take a moment for me to uncover, but we're actually dehumanizing ourselves. When we say that, it's COVID 19's fault, or it's, something that happened with my partner, with my job, in some other kind of relationship, or even early childhood. Not that we're saying that those things haven't had an impact or an influence, but as soon as we do that, we're kind of dehumanizing ourselves because we're taking ourselves out of our experience as the subject. We're always the subject of our own experience. But as soon as we put it outside of ourselves and we move away from it, we're dehumanizing ourselves. We're not actually allowing ourselves to be human. And we find this very often in certain spiritual circles, where we'd rather be in another state. We'd rather be someplace else already. Well, of course you would. Who wouldn't? But in the meantime, in the moving away, we're kind of solidifying and cementing a habitual pattern of moving away from our humanity. So not only are we dehumanizing ourselves, we're labeling, as soon as we label something outside of ourselves as being the culprit, we're also dehumanizing that. And it becomes two dimensional instead of three dimensional or multi dimensional. Because as humans that are interconnected, interwoven with the entire fabric of existence, we're multidimensional. So when we pause and we acknowledge that difficulty is here and we're honest with ourselves as to what that feels like, there's a natural intelligence that begins to open up in us. And that intelligence feels very, very warm. The warmth, the kindness. You could say it's akin to love because if we've been able to just pause and sit with something difficult long enough, we're coming into alignment with the deeper essence of who we are, which is love. And that's the intelligence, that's the wisdom inherent within us. So, in a way, you can hear that, but to experience it directly is what matters because this is what allows us to hang out in the soup, in the muck, in the messiness of challenge, of difficult feelings, of darkness. And if we hang here long enough, and sometimes it can be a process, we didn't get here overnight. Like all of the multiplicity of influences that impact our human composition, like who we are in every part. If you know anything about internal family systems, we have these parts, and when they're not integrated, the human parts aren't integrated into the wholeness of the fabric of who we are, then it can seem like there's a sense of separation. So this sense of separation didn't happen overnight. Like childhood is many, many years, and then there's adolescence, and then there's the young adult, and then there's all of our relations, and how they get on or don't, and what happens in those. So all of this has a impact on who we are as humans. And when we feel separate, when all these parts don't have an opportunity to integrate into the wholeness of the fabric of being, of the multiplicity, the multidimensional expanse that we are, that is truly connected to everything, then there will be fragmentation, there will be conflict, there will be times that aren't easy. And the gift in that is that that's the opportunity. So when we bump up against something that's difficult, right there, it's almost like a kiss from life that is saying, ah, here is a part that hasn't been met, that hasn't been acknowledged, that hasn't had an honest conversation, with the adult you, almost like a reparenting of that part so that it can calm, it can relax, and it can integrate, transmute, perhaps even, and join your humanness. So, what did we say so far? That you showed up here. Wonderful. That's the very first thing when things get difficult, to be able to show up and to notice how attracted we can be to distraction. You know, However that shows up. Getting really busy, going on the internet, just one more thing. This. The ways in which we distract ourselves. And in that, we're conditioning ourselves to move away from what's present. So there's that. And then there's just simply acknowledging that, yeah, it's really difficult right now. And in that acknowledgement, we can start to slow down and examine in a really kind and soft way. And that is it's an engagement with honesty. Yeah, and kindness and hope and faith. That if we hang out here in the difficulty long enough with really sensing and feeling and not objectifying ourselves, not dehumanizing ourselves, and not placing it out here that there is the culprit. Because as soon as we do that, then we hold ourselves captive like a victim. So we do that, and then we're here, and in that, and intelligence opens up. That's actually quite natural to us. And that's how the light cracks open. Something new emerges, a new way. The way through is out always. Otherwise, we just keep returning and returning. And we may return, we may meet a certain degree of what's been hidden because it was too difficult at one time to resource ourselves to really meet it. But then there may be another layer that we come back to, and we come back to, and we come back to. So it's this constant returning. Instead of leaving ourselves, we return to ourselves. And this intelligence that we are opens and opens and opens, and something new emerges, is revealed as a way of being in relationship to life in a way that feels gratifying and satisfying. And we then by taking care of ourselves, doing our good inner work, then we are, not only do we benefit, no, 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 everybody benefits. So in the old school that I grew up with, in the, you know, home environment that I grew up in was very kind of Catholic, and I had a huge, large Irish Catholic family, many aunts and uncles, and some of them were kind of trained in that old religious cultural way that still kind of lingers in many places all throughout the globe, is that you take care of everybody else first. I remember a particular aunt that I had. She had 9 or 10 children, I don't know, but she would be in service in the church and in the community and bring clothing and food and all of this to the community. And her children at home, were lacking in all of those things. And, it's kind of like similar in that we can starve ourselves of nourishment and, attend to everybody out here. So, can you sense that? Can you sense and feel that? That's like in a way we're dehumanizing ourselves by not attending, and we're, whatever the mind might be saying, like on, and it might be hidden too. That's why we need to do this kind of self examination, which is very kind. What are we telling ourselves when we leave ourselves to attend to something out here instead? Like that has to happen first. Like somehow it's more important. It doesn't work that way, because if we're depleted, if we're starving, if we don't have the comfort that we need within ourselves, we're going to have less and less, a depleted capacity to address anything outside of us in the world that also, yes, needs us, needs our attention, our care. Mother Earth needs us. But it is so important where we're coming from, to not come from a place of starvation or lack of nourishment or depletion, but to honor your own humanity, that it's all right to attend to yourself, to take time for the difficulties that might be happening right up close, and to become so intimate with yourself. And then, as you benefit from this, because you will, and the more you hang out here, there will be a light that opens and shines and illuminates a new way that could never have been imagined. And that will only benefit others more than you can imagine. And our globe, the collective of who we are, needs all of us to take care of ourselves in a very fortifying, enriching way. So the movement of our soul can be one from light, from love, from abundance, you know, not from victim, not from not enough, not from some label, because as soon as we do that, that's what we put on to what is going on outside of us. And we then are objectifying and we are dehumanizing life, the beings of life, which are alive. They're not objects, they're not to be consumed. And this is the thing to remember too about social media. And if you watched Social Dilemma, it's very easy to get hooked and sucked into all of that. And then you become the product. Then Then this kind of internet, which can be used like this right now for a beautiful thing, but then it can be used to consume you, your attention, to distract you from something. The time, your time is your commodity. Your time is so precious, to not give it away. So thank you for coming here to sit with me, because that's it. If you can sit here with me, you're sitting with you, because we're not separate. We're not different. I read this beautiful article the other day from the Dalai Lama, and this idea that if you're awakened to a certain degree or somehow spiritually, I don't really care for the word enlightened, but have a certain degree of spiritual realization, that you become less human. No, 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 never the case. You become more and more human, more sensitive, more alive, more capacity to be engaged with life as it is, with the same sorrows, with the same pains, with the same, sense of disharmony that can happen in so many places. Because if it's happening out there, you can be sure that it's happening here when there's an actual authentic realization, because the realization is that we are not separate. We're not.